Marx arrives at this focus on labor time as opposed to other parts of the labor process, basically by looking at all the different types of labor that are carried on under capitalism and abstracting from all these particular features and saying basically the only feature that all these different types of labor have in common is the time that it takes to produce a certain commodity or complete a certain labor process. So that time is the only variable that we can take from labor that applies to all different industries, all different types of production under capitalism, so that labor time becomes the only consistent way to measure labor. And even the way that Marx conceives of machinery is in terms of time. Basically, that a machine can do in 1 hour, let's say the amount of labor that it would take a human without a machine, 10 hours to do. So a machine is this condensed labor time. So that in this labor process, in the process of production, we have these three variables, which are all reducible to different aspects of time. So we have the machinery, which is condensed labor time. We have the time that it takes the workers to produce the equivalent wealth that they need to survive that day or that period. And then we have the time in which they are producing wealth past the point that they actually need to survive and reproduce. So machinery, subsistence labor time, and surplus labor time. Machinery, subsistence labor, surplus labor. So Marx says that all of these taken together equal the value of a commodity. So let's say a machinery adds 80 hours of labor time in a certain process. Subsistence labor adds 10 hours and surplus labor adds 10 hours. The value of, let's say there's just one commodity produced. To make it simple, the value of that commodity would be 100. The problem for Marx is then to show how this value of a commodity can be consistently related to the market price. So looking at data for market prices across a number of years and across different sectors of production and between different capitalists within the same sector, and try to show what is a ratio or a formula that can consistently relate the value of a commodity in labor time to the prices that those commodities are actually being sold for on the real market. So looking at real empirical data from the real market and then comparing that to this calculation of value in labor time, which Marx has derived from looking at production statistics. This is called the transformation problem, the transformation of value into prices. From what we've talked about leading up to this, we can see how important this is for Marx's project. He has all these philosophical ideas and sociological ideas about the importance of, for one, the importance of economics for understanding social relations, and then the importance of understanding the labor process for understanding economics, and in particular, the importance of labor time for understanding the labor process. And so he has this whole worldview where all these philosophical questions, artistic, cultural, subjective questions and phenomena can be related through social relations to economics through economics to labor. So labor is the linchpin of this whole worldview he has, where human existence, human society, human civilization can be seen as this totality with labor, and specifically labor time, as its linchpin. So he comes up with what he called the labor theory of value. Other people had done different labor theories of value. He had his own version to show how labor time, how these variables of labor time can be consistently related to the empirical data of market prices and of capitalist profits. That way, this philosophical idea about the importance of labor could have actual real-world applications. The problem is that he died before he was finally able to prove this. He had a rudimentary version that works in simplistic cases, but it doesn't work in real-world complicated economies. So for the last 150 years, people have bickered about this. There are some people who say it doesn't really matter if the labor theory of value can't actually calculate real-world prices. That wasn't Marx's interest. The importance is just to have the philosophical side of that to use as a guide for whatever studies or practical organizing we undertake. Then there's another camp opposed to that which says, no, the only thing that really matters is empirical calculations. If a theory can't consistently interface with real data, it's not very useful, so we should reject Marx's theory as an interesting failure, consign it to the dustbin with other outdated scientific theories like Ptolemaic astronomy, and then move on to real equations that can actually show real patterns and make real predictions about things like market prices and other real-world economic data. But then if we do that, we lose this whole philosophical, sociological side of Marx's project. And so for 150 years, people have fought about this, or people have just accepted the labor theory of value on faith, but without actually being able to demonstrate it, without actually having a full version. People have blamed the failure of communism or socialism on this failure of Marx to complete his theory. Other people have rejected the rest of Marx and Marxism because it rests so heavily on this theory which he failed to prove. Other people have used it to say all sorts of things about Marx, about the Marxist project, about what its worth is, about how practical, how useful it is. But none of them have actually tried and succeeded to just finish the theory as Marx intended it, to actually come up with a labor theory of value that could consistently relate these variables of labor time, as we've gone through them, to market data, and therefore come up with a system that could actually have this philosophical, world historical basis of Marx's system, but still be able to interface with real world specific data, make predictions, come up with concrete policies and plans for real world projects. That is until 2016, when a guy named Anwar Sheikh at the New School in New York, after 25 years of working on this, going through all these different schools of Marxism and Marxian economics and mainstream economics and other forms of heterodox economics, finally was able to come up with a completed labor theory of value that retains all of Marx's theoretical and logical interests, but is able to show a robust correlation between commodity values in labor time and real market prices and real profits. So naturally, the implications of this are huge. The opportunities for further research and further organizing and further political movements that this opens up are huge because we finally have this completed version of what Marx hoped to do, of what he was trying to do when he died. We can end this 150 years of strife and bickering, of hand-wringing and lamenting and speculating about what Marx would have done had he lived long enough to complete this theory. So essentially this is, in every way imaginable, a new beginning, a new foundation for the Marxist, the communist project.